get a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through all the mistakes, failures, and explosions that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
I am today's guest. My name is Victoria Scott, and my pronouns are she and her.
And I'm a cryptid Chris, he, him.
And today, we're talking about the Soviet Lunokhod moon rovers and why the guy who made the Ultima games owns one of them, legally, on the moon.
Wait.
Yeah. Admittedly, this is another one of these stories, Victoria can attest to this, where it started off as a one-parter with like a kind of narrow focus, and then as I read the history, I just kept going like, oh my god, I can't cut this out. So now it's a two-parter and a series.
We got some creatures here?
We have got some ups and downs. We have got some heroes. We have got, it's a good script whenever I get to a point while I'm researching where I'm crying about how cool and brave these dudes are. But that's mostly for part 2. And, as you have heard, we have got a guest. Victoria Scott is an automotive journalist, a photographer, and a host of the Trangerlismo podcast. Also a big space artifact aficionado. Victoria, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat about this. I've done a little bit of, in my automotive reporting, I've done some talking about, like, the American space rover project from, like, a technical perspective. But this will be fun to learn about.
And you'll get to learn how almost all of those ideas came from a Soviet Armenian dude, because the Soviet program was decades ahead of any American rover program prior to, like, 96.
This is the way it literally always was. This doesn't surprise me at all.
I'll send you a video later. It'll definitely show up in part 2, but it's showing like Soviet rover designs in the early 80s, like just prototypes that they were building and like playing around with in the desert. And then you compare that to Sojourner in 96, which is this tiny 25-pound little like, RC car. And it is wild to see the difference between them.
We built our own little beepy ball when, the Chad rover is just up there.
Now, I have picked out a topic that I think will nail the center of the Venn diagram of all of our interests. In old Soviet stuff, electric vehicles, space, and collecting space artifacts. So we are going to be talking about the Lunokhod rovers, which translates to moonwalker. However, before that, I have got a question. We have got a little discussion to cover because you own a massive, 10-foot tall trade show replica of a Buran Soviet space shuttle decked out in Roscosmos, or I guess RKA at the time, colors.
Yes.
How?
9 feet.
The coolest shit.
9 feet tall.
Jesus.
It weighs like 300 pounds if you include the base. It's dismantleable, but only kind of. So a little backstory for me. I used to live in Houston, Texas, and I worked at NASA for a little while. Wow. I was a software engineer for mission control. So I basically just did like ground side software for ISS stuff. It was cool. I worked next door to the building that's really cool. So there's like building 30 where like all the history and like just everything that has ever happened that was interesting in manned spaceflight in America has ever occurred. And I worked next door to it in a room that used to hold servers, and so it had metal walls and I couldn't get cell signal. And
awesome.
It had no windows. So, I was adjacent to cool things. But so I was living in Houston, and somebody posted on Twitter that this had gone up on eBay as a pick it up only, like buy it now item for $800. It is a 9 foot tall model of the Soviet Buran. And I was like already kind of fascinated with this because like the Buran to me is like very, it's interesting as a cultural artifact as like a very, very high functioning, well designed, space vehicle that was basically failed by its state collapsing. Like it never really achieved much, but that wasn't really a fault of the Buran. It was kind of the fault of the Soviet Union collapsing.
And it did fly successfly, unmanned.
It did, yeah. And it had more payload than the American shuttle, and it was much less compromised design because the orbiter body didn't actually have to have any rocketry inside it, and so you made a lot less compromises. And the whole thing's design was influenced based on like the shuttle itself because it was an attempt to maintain parity. Anyway, whatever. Yeah. It was just I found it fascinating, and so it came up, and I went to a shed at some guy's house in the middle of Houston, and it turned out that this guy had been involved in like dozens of space projects over his lifetime. He was just kind of embedded in the US aerospace industry, and like one of those was like, do you remember the rocketry project they were going to launch off like the Isle of Man?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was another one of this guy's like many ventures, but he had been high up in the Space Commerce Corporation in like 1989, which was basically an attempt. It's difficult to say like how serious of an attempt it was, right? But on paper, it was an attempt to say, okay, well, we're doing, we're opening things up to the Soviets now. We can pursue partnerships with them. So what if we used, Soviet rocket ships as launch vehicles for American satellites? And it was basically a very early attempt at this kind of like public-private synthesis that sort of became the dominant form of like space flight for the next 30 years. That's like all we have now. But at the time, this was a really early attempt at this, and so they had like they were advertising you could rent Mir. You could use
posters are so good.
They're so cool. Like literally space for rent, and it's just a beautifully rendered drawing of Mir.
Yeah. And listener, if you're watching or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see on the slide here the Need a Ride. Like Globkosmos, the Soviet program, was very much trying to get in on the launch game.
Yeah. Well, they desperately needed money.
Yes.
That's like the backdrop of this is they were like, all right, we'll do basically anything because we are so hard up for cash. Because again, this is like 1989 and the Soviet Union is falling apart at the seams. And they spent so much money developing the Buran that they just had no money left to actually use it by the end of the development cycle. So in any case, this guy, it was the chronology on it was a little unclear, but basically this model was built as like a trade show traveling exhibition thing in the Soviet Union. It is a hand carved wooden Buran body, and then like a hollow aluminum tube is basically made for the Energia portion.
Okay.
That was like a one-off as far as I'm aware. I don't think there are any others that exist like this. It is, I think, 1/24th scale, to give you an idea.
Okay.
Like the dimensions all seem to map up to like roughly that. And basically they went to a couple of trade shows. The American feds were like, what the fuck are you doing? I hope I can swear.
Yeah. Have at.
Okay, cool. They were like, you can't put American satellites on Soviet rocket ships. We are not that cool. And the company went through some dubious and interesting legal times about how much they knew about the Fed stepping in and saying you can't do that. There was like a radio contest at one point to like send a listener up to like Mir. It was crazy. But in any case, it appears to have, and this is what I've learned over the years that I've owned this. It appears that the rocket kind of went back to this guy. He kept it. It appears to have been loaned out and traveled around the U.S. It went to like a history of like spaceflight exhibition in Boston. It was apparently at Johnson Space Center for a while, and then it ended up in this guy's shed where it was just kind of like getting water damaged and sitting there falling apart. And so I saw it and I was like, yeah, I want this. So I went home and bought it on eBay. Apparently narrowly beating, I think, the Kennedy Space Center.
Awesome.
Yeah. Which this was very much like I had just quit my NASA job for reasons of like disillusionment. So this was very like personally gratifying. Then I took a Chevy Suburban to this guy's house and threw it in the trunk of it and, set it up in my living room at the time.
I have a critically important question.
Yes.
Who is that at the bottom left of the third image?
That is my, at the time, I was dating somebody that is her cat, Arnold.
Arnold.
Hilariously, like, I had written a story about this that got stuck in edit hell, and then, unfortunately, by the time it was finally edited and ready to run, Russia had invaded Ukraine the day before. So the appetite for, kind of waxing poetic about, like, the death of the Soviet Union and sort of, like, the effort that went into this
turned into a kind of fucking yikes situation.
Yes, justifiably so. But the thing that's really funny about this is that, like, this is obviously, like, a boondoggle, a doomed project that kind of, like, helped speed up the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it also did the exact same thing for the relationship I was in. We'd had troubles back and forth for a little while, mostly linked to the fact that I had come out the year before. And I picked this up and put it in the living room, and my now ex was like, yeah, I don't know if this is gonna work anymore.
The true litmus test.
It's me or the Buran. I've decided.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Can I keep Arnie?
Yeah, so, it's kind of funny because everybody I've told that anecdote to is like, well, I don't understand what the problem was. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
That would be a green flag,
I'm
actually.
sorry, but that SCC poster just goes so hard. I'm constantly drawn back to it.
Oh, yeah. Like, there's a bunch of other... we did an episode a while ago on Glove Cosmos and how their only main success was launching the world's most unhappy Japanese salaryman into orbit.
You, if you could have given him like the hood that lets you smoke a cigarette in space, he would have been infinitely happier.
He's just got like a little pressure seal in his helmet for fitting it.
Vapes would have changed the game.
There's a that
He's
you
gonna
could
look
absolutely
like a dude
put that in the helmet.
Just face completely smoked out, but still having perfect spatial awareness.
I know I've told this story, but before, but astronauts astronauts nowadays, because they're going to do spacewalks for a really long time and they can't reach up into their helmet, they will have food and water just kind of there available. And there's a really fun story from Chris Hadfield that we got from Mary Roach that is basically like, the water tube would always leak, and whenever it would leak, it would pour water onto their food bar, which is basically just like a big a bar of fruit by the foot. And whenever it got wet, it would turn into an amorphous floating mass that would, one time attempted to smother Chris Hadfield inside his helmet. So, he's just getting blobbed in orbit. Everyone's, no one can see inside the visor, but one of the guys on EVA is just kind of thrashing around at his helmet.
Okay, but at least for a split second, the gelatinous fruit space gummy, that had to...
Yeah.
I
also love Prey 2017.
No, just consider it, if they had that kind of detail level of monitoring, his blood sugar just tripled.
Oh, dude, there are so many things that were disasters, but there are so many things that weren't. Like, if Yuri Gagarin had died during Vostok 1, whenever his applesauce smothered him and fully filled his helmet...
Just during a Gemini flight, the 30th bowl of oatmeal was the one that killed our lad.
Well, no, that would have just been Frank Borman going postal in orbit. We do get to talk about Frank Borman before the end of this, and I am so excited to have our boy back.
Number one oatmeal consumer.
Unrelated, separate boy. I'm really stoked that Francisco Rubio got picked for Artemis 3, even though Artemis 3 seems to have a whole lot of kind of weird shit going on. Partially because I own his jacket, and that's how I found out that Francisco Rubio is a really, really tiny little dude. Because it does not fit on me.
It's just...
but...
What?
Is it like old school F1 drivers where they just have to find somebody who can wedge themselves into a 60s Lotus?
I don't think they don't really have the size requirements anymore, partially because, the Canadian who was on Artemis 2, fucking Jeremy Hansen, is massive. But it does help if you're tiny. And especially back then, on the Soviet program especially, they had to be super short. Being super short was a selection criteria for the original 20 cosmonauts.
You just have to have a large lad up there sometimes.
Just to prove that you can.
No, just hey, let's all chill out.
Or a food source.
I think he might have turned the others into food sources. Let's be real.
All right. So thank you for talking about that, Buran. I was very curious about that. Is this, for the purpose of exclusivity, the first time that story has been told on a podcast?
Yeah, actually, I'm pretty sure, because I wrote this story and I had to can it.
One more casualty.
And yeah, as far as I know, it's the only one. It's currently sitting in my storage unit in Houston because after my life exploded, I put it in storage. And then I live in Seattle, Washington now.
Oh, okay.
And so it's the mechanical challenges of moving a 300-pound, 9-foot tall object have been rather difficult.
Word of advice, recruit your fan base. They will do anything to help out with a giant rocket.
All I need to know is if I had one of those like sketchy as hell Centurion trucks, I'd take it. Well, the most comfortable road trip vehicle known to man.
Yeah, if anybody wants to, let me strap this down to the back of their pickup truck and drive it 2,200 miles, let me know. I'm down.
That or a RevCon Trailblazer.
Ideally, while gasoline is still obtainable.
Speaking of sketchy vehicles that may or may not have weird shit strapped to them, let's get into talking about Lunokhod. Yes, that is actually an accurate segue. This thing was one of the uses for this thing would be to rescue a stranded cosmonaut by just having him sit on top and then drive him to a backup LK that would have been nearby.
Awesome.
Just tucking the legs.
Yeah, Alexei Leonov riding this thing like a horse, holding onto the whip antennas at the front.
Going 3 miles an hour.
2 kilometers an hour was its max speed, actually. Because the motors
Even
were
slower, Chris.
I'm
300
sorry,
watts.
he's getting mogged by the, what is it?
The Apollo Lunar rover, the manned one. Before we get into this, I need to explain my sourcing. And for this one, I will fully admit I went down a whole bunch of rabbit holes trying to track stuff down. My main source was the book Soviet and Russian Lunar Exploration by Brian Harvey. I also used an article from a 1971 ARPA report on the Lunokhod 1. I used space journalist Anatoly Zok's very good website, Russian Space Web. Read it. I used the work of space historian James Oberg, and I found an old article by Soviet rover engineer Oleg Sokolov, brackets not the serial killer. If you look up Oleg Sokolov, I'm pretty sure it shows you a serial killer. I have not gone down enough of a rabbit hole to establish a difference between the two, but I think the serial killer died in the 1800s.
Why is it James Oberg asterisk?
We'll get to that, because there's a couple of myths around this story, some of which may have come from or been propagated by otherwise established space historians. Finally, I used the 2007 French documentary Tank on the Moon, which I'd highly recommend watching. You can find it online at Dailymotion. It's very good, and it has a bunch of interviews with the scientists, engineers, and crew of this rover.
Also, I'm sorry I'm interjecting, but I had to look it up because I was wondering how fast the Apollo lunar rover could go.
It was like
design
8,
top
right?
speed of 6, but apparently they got it up to 11.
Yeah, just ripping the governor out. Hell yeah.
Hey, I learned a trick, just stuffing a paperclip into one hole, and this thing is suddenly just ripping shitties across the moon.
There's an entire 4 more gears on this thing.
Hey, it's got 4 electric motors. You might as well use all of them.
Yeah.
But still.
So, as always, all links will be down below in the show notes.
Lunar Plan B.
So, we are still on our shit talking about the Soviet manned lunar program, slowly picking it apart episode by episode, even though I have said multiple times we are going to do a series, but we're kind of picking it apart so much I don't know what we're going to talk about when we do it. During our episode on the OKB-1 coup with Joe Kasabian, you may have heard me call the manned program N1L3. The N1 here is obvious. It's the N1 mega rocket, the Soviet counter to the Saturn V. But the L3 refers to the fact that the Soviet manned lunar program was meant to happen in 3 phases, with L3 being the phase where actual cosmonauts would land on the moon. The reason for this phased approach was because the Soviets intended to stay on the moon well after the American Apollo program had ended. Korolev had dreamed of a lunar base, of infrastructure, lunar stations, and launch pads that would send cosmonauts off on deep space missions. Phase 1, or L1, would be what we call now the Zoned program, a plan to use a proton launcher to fire a cut-down Soyuz spacecraft on a quick flyby of the moon. Basically, Soviet Apollo 8, Soviet Artemis 2, but worse. These never flew with people, but they did fly with turtles, safely carrying the first Earthlings around the moon and back. It's just that those Earthlings were reptiles.
Hell yeah.
They didn't want to be here, but we sent them.
Yeah, I don't think you can, like, the space dogs is bad enough. I believe 4 turtles made the trip. I know 2 of them died. Because one of them on its return had a bad re-entry and crashed. The middle phase, L2, though, called for robotic exploration of the moon. This had been happening for a while. The Lunar program was in full swing from the late 50s, flinging probes around the moon, into the moon at Mach fuck. We talked about this in an old episode where the probes that were meant to impact the moon had, like, propaganda grenades in them, that whenever they hit at hypersonic speeds, they would fling tiny little Soviet propaganda medallions everywhere. Which is like, maybe in a couple of decades, people can go and find these collector's items on the moon. They're still there.
Honestly, kind of cool.
If you find your Medal of Lenin embedded in the regolith, you can keep it.
Just like Neil taking his first step onto the moon and then something fucking like gravities through his helmet.
Steps on it, pierces his suit. Aw, shit.
Oh no, yeah, they would be sticking out of the regolith. So the L2 phase called for those earlier robotic missions to be massively expanded, with bigger rockets flinging bigger probes capable of doing bigger science.
Was the L2 phase of things where, like, the mission, I forget what the name of it was off the top of my head, but the mission to photograph the dark side, was that where that came in?
That was an early Luna. I believe that was Luna 3. That was before the moon race had started. But it was in, like, the phases in the Luna program are kind of weird because they overlap a bit.
Okay.
Because once L2 starts, it co-opts the earlier Luna program and keeps its numbering.
Gotcha.
But this would have been before L2.
Okay.
And that's also a fun story because they did it with stolen American film.
Yes. Yes. But they still managed to figure out a way to dev and scan it in space. So yes. I give them full credit for that.
So L2 called for massive orbiting laboratories packed full of experiments, automated sample return missions that would bring moon rocks back to Earth, and critically lunar rovers. A big part of this was the Proton Booster, the default Soviet heavy lifter, coming online in 1965. So this is important because everything up to that point had flown on Luna rockets, which is a modification of the Soyuz, and it has a pretty tiny payload that restricts what you can send. The Proton, though, could send 3 times as much payload, and that meant that these engineers and designers suddenly had 3 times more mass that they could play with. They could build bigger things that were more capable, they could pack more sensors in. The asterisk there is when the Proton worked, because it failed 5 times more often than the Soyuz did.
There's a reason why I am of the firm opinion that the Proton has the mandate of hell.
Yeah. This thing had a success rate of 89%, which for a rocket is really not good.
How does that compare to, our beloved Starship today?
Well, it has yet to fly a successful flight, but it's also in the test phase, and those don't always get counted. I prefer to compare this to the Soyuz rocket of the era, which had a 98% success rate. Also, it had some of our favorite fuels. It had dinitrogen tetroxide and unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine. Now, all of this was at first handled by Sergei Korolev's OKB-1, which had a ton of experience with satellite and rocket design. They could get a payload to the moon, but they didn't have any experience with rovers. In fact, no one did at the time. I need to be clear on this. Rovers did not exist. They would have to be invented. There had been like somewhat robotic tanks. I know the Nazis had one in World War II, the Goliath, I think.
Yes.
But none of they weren't really remote controlled. They were wire guided. This would be an entirely new thing, attempted across distances that were unimaginable to robotic designers of the time. And since Korolev basically wanted a robot tank, he turned to tank designers at the Transmash tank factory in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg.
I'm sorry, you're being forced to use wheels now instead of treads.
They did have that debate. Yeah. Of those designers, one quickly rose to lead this new robot tank project. Designer Alexander Kamergian. I guarantee you I'm mispronouncing that. Kemerjian was a Soviet-Armenian tank designer with a reputation for thinking outside the box and finding innovative solutions to problems. Which was fortunate because, again, no one knew what a rover was, and the engineering challenges and requirements that OKB-1 gave them were extreme. So they had, like, strict mass and volume requirements, they could only use so much power, and, critically, the rover would have to be controlled in real time. There was no automation going on. This thing would be man-controlled at all times. And yet, having worked on a university rover project, this sounds like the most incredible thing to work on. It basically turned into like Lockheed Skunk Works, but for tanks, to the point that they had an entire wing of the factory cordoned off just for them because this thing was a state secret now.
This is kind of funny because my reference point for experimental rover projects is when I was at NASA, we had a little pride parade contingent that was like my first time I had come out and like done all that stuff, and we had a four-wheel steering Mars rover concept that it unveiled to the public in like 2002, and it was just sitting in a shed somewhere, and so we'd just take it out for the pride parade and just whip donuts in the middle of the street.
Oh. Hell yeah.
So what I'm saying is they should have tried that. They should have tried bringing out the tank, the tank for the moon to the pride parades in the Soviet Union, of which I'm sure they had many.
So yeah, like these guys are just experimenting on everything. They had no established knowledge base to go off of, so it was fully just throw shit at the wall and see what works. They made prototypes with treads, wheels, legs. They made hoppers.
I love the idea of a Soviet at.
Yeah. Like, we got a video here where I can show this off. This is one of the first prototypes that they had.
It's the moon onion.
So, listener, this is an armored turtle on tank treads. The entire, like, the electronics segment of the rover is just a giant half sphere that you would put all the batteries inside of.
Also, I'm fascinated. Can we go to the next one? The little railway. That
is actually the next thing we're going to talk about, because in order to test these rovers, they built a moon yard. They built what they called the Lunar Drome. And this is something that has been replicated in basically every competent rover program. You build a sandbox to replicate whatever environment you want to test in, be it Mars or the moon, and you drive it around to see how it handles those situations.
Oh, see, I just thought this was the Soviet adaptation of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. Another unknown at this time, and this was a real unknown, was the lunar surface. What the fuck is it? No one had any real data on its consistency at this point, because up to now, every Luna probe had been smashing into it at hypersonic speeds, or had been so tiny and light that it didn't have the room for equipment to actually measure it. Some scientists theorize that it was covered in centimeters or even meters thick of lunar dust, and that any lander would just sink right into it like quicksand.
The concept is baffling.
It was a valid concern at the time. No one knew. And they actually never found out
but that's
experimentally.
What I mean, is like, they didn't know. Therefore, the concept is
baffled
baffling.
them.
Wait, this thing had a ninth wheel?
Yes. That's getting a little ahead.
Sorry.
We'll talk about that with... No worries. With like the scientific payload, that was just for measuring distance. That was like, like when construction workers have that little wheel measure that they move around. That's what that was.
Are you telling me this thing wasn't packing in enough horsepower and torque to just rip off?
No, that wheel was non-motorized. It was purely for counting rotations.
Yeah, to stop it from doing wheelies. If that guy on the ground is going to pull the trigger and this thing is going to do a 0 to 60 time that hasn't been seen before.
Dom Toretto's space program.
We somehow put a supercharger on this thing.
So fun fact, this thing did have a radio on it and a music box that was meant to play the Soviet national anthem, but it's just like repeating family over and over. I don't know family in Russian, but I know that Union is Soyuz.
The payload of this has to be able to handle at least one 6-pack of Corona.
There is the ceremonial Corona when it is recovered at some point in time.
Yeah, next to the Medal of Lenins, you can just pick up off the ground.
Hey.
There's just still an ice-cold Corona.
So they didn't actually, whenever they were designing this rover, they did not actually figure out what the surface of the moon was going to be like. Instead, they asked Korolev, and he guessed. And while he did guess correctly, he still guessed, which is, he said, it's solid. Like the dust is there, but it's negligible. which, you know, happy that worked out. Happy that we didn't see, like, Neil hop off of the last rung and just...
He just gets sucked straight into the ether.
Suddenly all those childhood warnings we received about quicksand were irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just turns out the lost footage of that specific, first man on the moon, he just no-clipped into the back rooms on that one.
So the next issue, as you saw in that first prototype, was whether or not to use wheels or treads. Again, they asked Korolev, but this time he got pissed and told them to leave him alone because they're the fucking experts, which I kind of respect. Also, the dude was probably like, early 1960s, he's not dead of hemorrhoids yet, but he is working himself to death.
One is percolating on his person, if you will.
Yeah, he has a hemorrhoid like the dome on that prototype rover.
Oh.
So eventually they wound up going with wheels instead of treads, for two reasons. First, the electric motors they picked were only 300 watts, and they might not have been able to drive the tank treads. Second, they figured that 8 wheels gave them reliability, so that if they lost a couple, they could keep driving. And this is actually a good idea that has been borne out. Spirit, one of the American rovers on Mars, famously, its front wheel broke, and their way of fixing it was to just drive the rover backwards.
Fantastic.
And then it wound up being a scientific discovery because by dragging the broken wheel across the ground, they were like digging a little trench and they were able to get access to like under the dust, basically. They were digging up parts of the Martian dust that they would not have access to otherwise.
Did they find any medals of Lenin in there?
Oh my god, just finding the that natural rock, the man on Mars, but it just has like a perfect hole in its head, its forehead from like a Mars probe that came in at hypersonic speed. So this team's approach to design was completely iterative, which sounds incredible to work on. It does actually have drawbacks though. So any new idea called for a new prototype that would be tested in their sandbox, which, as we talked about, they rode around in a cute little minecart so they could stay next to it. It's awesome. And eventually, once a rover was proven, they graduated to testing in Kamchatka, which is basically as far east as you can get in Russia. It's basically just north of Japan.
Yeah, it's the dongle
on
the end.
The dingly bit. Yeah.
Now, while Kamurjian was an expert on tanks, there was a lot his team didn't know about space, so they were in constant contact with the engineers over at OKB-1 or OKB-301. And I need to talk about these guys a little bit, because we actually talked about them in a previous episode. These guys used to be a jet fighter design company called Lavochkin. But then because of Soviet OKB stuff, they become a space OKB. They stopped making fighter planes because they weren't that good at it. And then they immediately got annexed by OKB-52 under Vladimir Chalamet. And they became like a subsidiary. Kind of like a bad end for an illustrious fighter manufacturer.
Hey, they live on in War Thunder.
Yeah, well, they're still around now, and the good end to their story is they become the Soviet Union's best space probe manufacturers. They still, Lavochkin today is principally a Russian space probe manufacturer.
I mean, they survived, you know?
Yeah, they made it.
They made it. I'm sure many, many, many OKBs did not.
And they eventually got their independence from OKB-52. Like, they clawed themselves out of the jaws of Vladimir Chalamet. I know I say this every single time. I love OKB politics so fucking much. I love that a world-leading space program was led by people who were constantly doing, like, Death of Stalin shit to each other. And, you know, that's one thing. That's how Glushko, the guy who wanted the Buran, came to be in charge of his rival's OKB. But anyway, like, these tank designers, they keep running into problems, a lot of space problems. Some of these problems have never been solved before, some of them have, so they go to the space engineers at OKB-1 and they ask for advice. So one of these is that on Earth, whenever metal surfaces touch or rub together, they're protected by a thin layer of oxides. In space, this does not exist. And the metal can actually, like, fully bond together. So if you have two moving metal parts in space, either through cold welding or I believe it's galling, they can just mesh and become one piece. And at the same time, any lubricants that you would use to protect them can boil away in the vacuum.
Love that.
And the solution to this was that the engineers at Transmash, they just invented a special lubricant that didn't boil off in space, which is still used today. And they built the entire rover out of a special aluminum titanium alloy whose composition became a state secret.
Oh my god, they made it more rigid.
And they hid every single gearbox inside tiny pressurized chambers so they would never be exposed to vacuum.
Oh god, they actually did make it more rigid and more secure.
Yeah.
It's very funny because like the go-to Soviet space anecdote that people always quote that's completely wrong is the pencil thing.
Yeah.
That, NASA developed the pen, look at how much money we waste, which isn't true. But like this is actually the version of that is true. Like, that your lubricant's boiling off, we'll just simply invent the lubricant that doesn't do that.
And on the inefficiency side, the wheels were made of titanium, but they were machined out of solid blocks, like cubes of titanium.
So they were just titanium
They were
wheels.
just machined down, yes, to produce these little wheels.
Could you imagine the clout at the Cars and Coffee, though, if you roll up on billet titanium? Goddamn.
Me rolling up with my bare-ass titanium rims, just sparks going.
Yo, what are those? That's actually a state secret. I can't tell you.
Yeah, nice FRS nerd.
See, here I was expecting that you were going to say that in order to not cold weld the parts together, that the parts were made out of like alternating materials.
Okay, that would have whipped.
No, they just went with titanium. Soviets had a lot of that stuff. They built submarines out of that stuff.
No, hear me out. They needed to have the Soviet, tank recovery log on this thing.
Yeah, mounted on the back.
Yeah, just the ancestral log has made its way to the moon.
It would provide armor, too.
Perfect.
So, all of this taken together meant that this rover was huge. The finished Lunokhod rover would be the size of a small car, and it would mass around 750 kilos or 1,600 pounds, which is still, pretty light, all things considered, but it's big. And because of this, because they had this huge payload that they had to put on the moon, that meant that they needed a new lander, a new spacecraft that would actually get it down to the surface. And this is where we circle back around to OKB 301.
Just as an aside, my reference point for this is I know a decent amount about the US Lunar rover, which that weighed 460 pounds. So
the Apollo one?
Yeah, so just for an idea of scale, this is 4 of those.
Yes. And that one is this tiny little fold together, basically this thing is a Lada that 5 men are going to remote control from several thousand kilometers away. So, OKB 301, they suddenly had the same benefit that the rover crew did. They had previously done work on Luna probes, which were tiny and could only carry limited payloads. They suddenly had a fuck ton more mass to work with, and they invented what is called the E8. The E8 is kind of weird, where it is a common lander infrastructure that can be used for a whole bunch of different things, depending on what the mission requires. So this common infrastructure, you can mount a rover on it, you can mount a sample recovery rocket on it that looks like a dick, or you can turn it into a giant orbiting laboratory that could be packed with hundreds of pounds of sensors. And all of these were built on the same infrastructure, and that meant that they could manufacture a lot of them really quickly. And basically, again, because they spread this out over 3 different missions, and because the Soviets were launching sample recovery attempts, they were launching these orbiters, they were launching rovers, they produced a lot of these things, and that meant that they could launch them very frequently. There were multiple of these Luna missions per year from 1965 onward, and a whole lot of them fail.
Quinn, a lot of them do what exactly they were designed to do, actually.
So, I think we have talked about this before. There was a Soviet attempt to one-up Apollo 11 by sending one of these sample recovery probes, by rush launching it and trying to get a lunar sample back to Earth before the Americans. That was Luna 15, and it crashed hilariously. Made it all the way to the moon, it survived its proton booster, and then it just smashed into the moon.
It just burned hard right in.
scattering thousands more medals of Lenin across the regolith.
The medals of Lenin falling out of it like sonic rings.
Oh my god. Building a Soviet spacesuit, but it's just that it's that armor from Wolfenstein The New Order, where it's made of these interlocking little golden hexagons.
I was gonna say, it also looks like the Sunshine armor, but it's all just the metals.
We're going North Korean general on Alexei Leonov's spacesuit.
My funky Juche lunar armor.
Bolides can't kill you if you're a hero of the Soviet Union times 2000.
A bolide pierced my armor, but I can still hear the voice of the party.
So, with the lander designed and a series of tested prototypes, work on the Lunokhod really picked up in 1966, which is also the year that Korolev died of ass surgery. While the tank designers still worked in their tank skunk works, and they actually lived in it, this is where we get into some like startup territory. They called it the Charmash Hotel, because Char is tank. So it was the Tank Mash Hotel. They had access to facilities in Moscow and Crimea, where different teams were testing their prototypes pretty much 24/7. By this time, the design had mostly stabilized to what we know today, so I want to take a second to talk about it. The finished Lunokhod rover was around 750 kilos or 1,600 pounds and was the size of a small car, like we talked about. It had 8 wheels, each driven by an independent electric motor that could push it to a whopping 2 kilometers an hour, max speed.
The chud Soviet rover mocking my little American one.
Just rolling over an American rover like it's a monster truck.
I'm looking at the anatomy of this vehicle, and the first thing that I've thought of is it's kind of like a bin shape.
It's a bathtub.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking of is like, what if the design of the rover was like, it's a bigger rover than the Americans one? It's got a big bucket and a claw, and the intention is for it to go pick up and eat the other rover. Yeah.
This is very much like the they probably mounted. They added more space so they could mount a diesel engine inside it, just like the electrified buses in Moscow, for the sole purpose of rolling coal on the Americans on the lunar
and
surface.
It is completely self-contained, except for one small like blow-off valve to just.
Yeah, they pressurized that too.
Well, you gotta keep the moon's cold sometimes.
Getting unheard of horsepower measures just because the the atmosphere difference is insane.
So, mounted above the wheels was the main pressurized container, which sort of looks like a giant white bathtub that contained all of the rover's internals, so batteries, computers, that kind of stuff. And then mounted on top of the bathtub was a large lid with solar panels on the inside. Deployable solar panels are not new, and they are a great idea in rovers that has been replicated in pretty much every solar-powered rover since solar panels take up a lot of space and they need to be folded up to fit in the rocket. However, the lid on Lunokhod rovers was not just to save space. See, temperature control on the moon is a huge problem. During a 2-week-long lunar day, temperatures rise to 120 degrees Celsius, and then they plunge to minus 130 degrees Celsius during the night. A ridiculous amount of work went into the Lunokhod's thermal control systems. During the day, raising the lid exposed a white metal radiator surface for rejecting heat, and then the lid could be closed at night to help conserve heat. And when passive measures failed, the rovers packed an active measure, a brick of polonium-210.
It's awesome. Beautiful.
This is not an RTG. This is not generating power. This is hot. That is all it is.
That's all it fucking does.
And I need to point out here, normal applications of this, people do these, like you can use nuclear heat sources. That is a thing. It has been used in other rovers.
You put it in people's tea.
Yeah. But those normally use uranium or plutonium, things that can warm up, things that produce, a nice amount of radiation. Polonium is incredibly radioactive. It is orders of magnitude more radioactive than uranium or plutonium. To give you an idea, uranium has a half-life in like the tens of thousands of years. Polonium has a half-life of about half a year. It is pumping out a ludicrous amount of heat.
Correct me if I'm wrong, polonium is like even quicker than like cesium, which is the drop and run sticks.
Yeah. I believe these ones, they made an alloy with gadolinium so that it didn't, because if you just have a brick of pure polonium, it will melt. It will warm itself up so much that it goes above its melting point. It glows pure blue, and then it kind of like, well, I mean, if you're watching that, you are Swiss cheesed with alpha particles, so don't bother running away.
Yeah, they don't bother putting drop and run warnings on polonium, because by the time you can read it, you're dead.
Holding up the cesium rod, but it just says like, have fun. Enjoy yourself.
It's just oops in all caps.
Enjoy the next 24 hours. Smiley face. So mounted on the back of the rover outside the pressurized bathtub was a nuclear heat source. Again, this is not an RTG. There is no power. It is a warm rock.
I fucking hate that. On principle alone.
And the rover had a ventilation system that could vent gas over that rock to, like, it basically had a gas flow from inside the pressurized chamber over this warm rock. And so, like, it could get heat in during the lunar night.
It could fart on the hot rock.
Basically, yeah.
Kill me. I hate it.
And then during, like, if the rover's internals got too hot, then they would divert gas away from the rock, and they would divert it through a heat exchanger that would help cool the rover down. So, like, this is incredibly cursed stuff, but at the same time, I do need to say this is an actual elegant manner of cooling and heating a rover. They made one system that could do both, and it just, like, they are trying to handle an environment that has a 250 degrees Celsius temperature delta. It goes to 120 in the day and a minus 130 at night.
I'm not arguing
That's fucking
it, but
impressive.
Just, fuck's sake.
Yeah, they do have the thing that they murdered that guy with.
Yeah, they have the hot brick.
Now, with the rover working and the lander ready, the Transmash team needed people to drive it. This being a space program, their first instinct was to use pilots. And after those guys failed, they tried tractor drivers, then truck drivers, they tried cyclists. And they found that none of these groups had the necessary skills or instincts to drive the rover as a team. So all of those previous jobs, it's just, oh, you know how to drive the one vehicle by yourself.
Their target audience, gamers.
We just said teamwork.
You got
Fuck the first words from the moon, but you have to bleep it because they say the gamer word.
No, these guys, they have the Soviet ethnography diagram up and going, judging by your driving, you are mayhaps, I don't know.
Are you a Tatar? So what eventually worked was tankers, because these are the only guys who A, drive things, and B, have to work together as a team.
Because if they fuck up, they just get punched in the back of the head by the commander of the tank.
Yeah, the commander's just there to kick you.
They look like they are having so much fun in that picture.
You wouldn't have fun teleoperating a vehicle with like a 3-minute delay?
Well, 2 seconds, but...
Yeah, with a KGB operative with a gun in the room at the same time.
So they do actually make a point of this. By 1966, the gulags had been, formally abolished for 6 years, but no one... Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, like, they needed crews, and they selected tankers, because this was a remote-controlled vehicle, but it had a crew, and it had a crew of 5. It needed a commander, a driver, a navigator, an engineer, and a radio operator. And all of them, that was like the full-time crew. They had backup crews. The idea was that they would switch around after like 8-hour shifts. The selection criteria were, quote, top-class military engineers, young but experienced, sporting and in good health. And square brackets here, none of these guys knew what they were being selected for, in typical Soviet space fashion.
Don't worry about it. You'll be great.
Yeah, like, what are you making me volunteer for?
Excellence.
An initial crop of 25 was cut down to 17, and only then were they told what they were doing. At that point, 3 of them quit, citing stress. Basically, like, hey, you're gonna drive a rover on the moon, and the 3 that quit are basically like, hey, I think I could do it, but if I fuck it up, I have a family that loves me.
There's a man with a gun in the room with me.
If I ding the Lunokhod rover on the moon, they will not find my body.
I'm gonna get fit into Lavrenti Beria's personal human wood chipper.
Your corpse will be put in Lunokhod 2. There's enough space.
It's what the instrument chamber is. It's for you.
The pilot recruits were formed into 2 teams of 5, and they all had their own designated backups in case they got sick. This was handled like a space program. They were trained in driving the rover around the same lunar drome it was tested in, except they had to navigate purely through the rover's shitty cameras. So, among other things, they had a 2-second actual delay from Earth to the moon, but the cameras and the radio were so shitty that they basically got a new snapshot every 10 seconds. So in the documentary, they describe like, all right, we move forward 10 centimeters. We wait for the picture. We move forward 10 centimeters. We wait for the picture. We move forward 10 centimeters. And then the picture shows them like flipped upside down in a crater. And they're like, fuck.
Yeah, then you hear a weird click behind you, and you're incentivized to do better.
and your backup is suddenly moved up a rung.
I am kind of curious about whether or not they could if they roll the thing over, can they open the solar panels really fast
like a
to
kickstand,
flip it back up, right? Like a battle
what is it? Like a clam? It just
yeah.
It could flap through the air.
it flips upside down and just flies through the lunar non-existent atmosphere like a horseshoe crab.
Spraying radioactive gas as it
with
goes.
the warm fucking thing.
So the Soviets had the rover, they had trained crews, they had landers, and they had rockets. Everything necessary to put a tank on the moon. Documentary name drop, watch it. But remember, this program is L2. It is phase 2. It is only meant to happen once the zoned flybys are done. However, in December 1968, the Americans came to the rescue. Hello, listener, and welcome to the mid-reel ad. If you enjoy Failure to Launch, more bad space history, and you want to hear more of it more often, there is an option, the FTL Patreon. Signing up at any tier gets you access to monthly bonus episodes and Q&As, and joining an elevated tier gets you even more content, like Chris-narrated minisodes. If that sounds good, you can sign up at www.patreon.com/failure to launch. And now, back to the episode.
Lunokhod, not Luna Stop.
The launch of Apollo 8 on a flyby of the moon with 3 astronauts, brackets Frank Borman best boy, immediately threw the Soviet lunar program into chaos. Overnight, the entire L1 phase of the plan had been rendered obsolete, and while the scientists still wanted to go ahead, the Kremlin worried that launching an objectively shittier copycat Apollo 8 would just make them a laughingstock, not an actual serious contender. Because remember, the zoned spacecraft is a cut-down Soyuz. It is missing the orbital module. It is only supposed to have one dude in it. It is basically like a shittier Gemini craft, while the Americans are now using Apollo. At the same time, the N-1 mega rocket was facing delays, and it was becoming clear that the L3 phase to put cosmonauts on the moon would not happen before Apollo 11. That just left L2, the rover and probe missions, as the only thing that the Americans did not have a counter for. It was the only part of this manned program that was unique to the Soviets and that they could actually claim as a PR victory. And so they rushed it, and pretended to the world that it was always the plan and it was always the only plan. They argued in the press that they'd never wanted to send cosmonauts to the moon in the first place, and that rovers were actually cheaper and safer. The Americans were actually, like, super cruel sending people up there. What happens if they die? Have they even thought of that? What about their families?
Nah, just let it rip.
Meanwhile, Alexei Leonov standing, like, off to the side of the press conference, like, desperately trying to hold it, like, stop himself from screaming. Context listener, Alexei Leonov is the cosmonaut who does the first spacewalk, and he was almost guaranteed to be the first cosmonaut on the moon as far as, like, selection. Also a really good painter. With pressure from the Kremlin mounting to get some kind of Soviet win on the board, the first Lunokhod was readied for launch. It was mounted on an E-8 lander provided by Lavochkin, and it was put on top of its Proton booster. And then, on February 19th, 1969, in Baikonur Cosmodrome, in the morning, the rocket exploded seconds after lifting off.
Yes.
I do not have a picture of it. I do have a picture of other Proton doing other Proton things.
Yeah, when I say mandate of hell, this is what I'm rotating in my mind constantly.
I've got it a slide down. Proton, we never fail to fail.
It's like the exact opposite of a Martin Baker product.
Yeah, a certified Martin Banger.
I was just thinking, like, we need to find a way to do that, but for like Proton, a certified Proton failure. Fuck, I don't know. We'll work on it.
We're gonna workshop it.
Unlike Proton, that clearly never received enough workshopping.
It's honestly hilarious, and like Proton does wind up like it works 89% of the time, which is horrible for a rocket, but still, like, 9 out of 10 are gonna make it there. It is amusing how many, like, Soviet or Russian interplanetary probes fail purely because the Proton either explodes or puts them in the wrong orbit. Fucking, like, Phobos Grunt, one of the missions that was supposed to put the Russian space agency, like, back, like, Roscosmos is back, we're a real agency, we're doing science. It failed because Proton put it in the wrong orbit and then it deorbited. So, After the explosion, crews were sent out to recover as much wreckage as they could and try to figure out what exactly had gone wrong. In the end, it was found to be a problem with the rocket's fairing. But apparently, they did not recover everything, and this is where the asterisk on James Oberg comes in. According to the stories, they did not recover the polonium heat source. Quote, apparently, some local troops downrange on sentry duty found it and, clearly insufficiently briefed about the dangers of polonium radiation, used it to keep their patrol's hut warm for the rest of that exceptionally cold winter.
Oh god,
Awful, awful, awful idea, but also dudes
I
rock.
smell where this is going and I don't like it.
As this is reported, investigators eventually found and recovered the very warm rock. So the reason I put an asterisk there is that this story is a little dubious. It is not as dubious as, say, like the batshit conspiracy theories about Bondarenko or Komarov or Gagarin, but it is lacking as much evidence as I would like. I found this story repeated in multiple sources, all pointing back to space historian James Oberg and an article on his website. Unfortunately, that website is not up anymore. I tracked it down on the Wayback Machine and found out it was a 1999 article in New Scientist. New Scientist magazine nowadays is pretty full of slop pop science and not really to be trusted, but I'm not certain how it was 25 years ago. The article does contain the story everyone attributes to Oberg, though if he's talking about the rover launch, he gets the year wrong. He says that it happened in 1970 instead of 1969 when the explosion actually happened. He also does not list any sources in his article. Oberg is generally a trusted and well-respected space historian, so there is that going for him, but in conclusion, I can find no positive evidence that this story actually happened. I can also find no evidence that it did not happen.
I have a stupid question, though.
Sure.
Like, it's polonium. If they used it all winter, wouldn't they have been soup by, like, a night 2?
If I'm not mistaken, polonium typically, puts out a higher energy radiation that's usually stopped by the skin.
Well, it puts out alpha, pure alpha particles, so Polonium-210 decays into, I can't remember the exact number, I believe it's lead-206.
But either way,
which
if
is
you
inert.
touch it and then, touch something that you're ingesting, then you're, getting the RP...
Then you're super
yeah,
duper
you're getting
fucked,
the RPG at a ping pong ball experience.
Yeah. However, we are very likely not talking about pure polonium, because pure polonium would also just immediately melt, and they wouldn't have been able to use it in the rover in the first place. I'm not arguing for this. I'm just trying to, put the pieces together, where the gadolinium, it still would have been significantly more radioactive than uranium. I am doubtful because, these guys very likely would have died, and it would have been reported more. This has been my personal penance, because I did a misinformation when I found this, and I was like, oh my god, this story's so cool, this is so Soviet, without fully looking into it. And this is my penance for that. I tracked this down. It is unlikely to have happened because, yes, these guys would have been rendered soup.
A gently simmering borscht.
I got the numbers for pure polonium, which, again, this very likely was not. It would have been a gadolinium-polonium alloy that had much less radioactivity to it. But pure polonium puts out 140 watts per gram of pure alpha particles, which is 300 times more than uranium.
The only space heater that reduces its users to a soup-like homogenate instantly.
Do not worry, friend. You will be sufficiently warmed.
All right, well, since it's technically possible, I'm going to believe in it fully.
Yeah.
I'm ignoring all of your disclaimers. This is now part of my belief system.
And it's one of those things where it's it's the fucking Cold War. You cannot rule anything out because people were brushing their teeth with fucking radium. But at the same time, it's this kind of stretches the belief a little bit of dudes playing with polonium. Sometimes the story is that they were found within a couple of days. Sometimes I doubt the ones where it's oh, they lasted all winter. No, they would not. They would not have lasted the week.
I have shriveled into just a little pelmeni-sized lump.
So the failure meant no PR win for the Soviet Union, which only became more embarrassing when the Luna 15 sample recovery probe we talked about failed to beat Apollo 11. Add to that 2 N-1 rocket explosions, and 1969 was not a good year for the Soviet lunar program. The next Lunokhod launch was a year and a half later in November 1970. And thankfully, this one didn't proton itself across the upper atmosphere. The trip to orbit and then over to the moon went uneventfully, and the Luna 17 lander touched down in the Sea of Rains on November 17th. So this is something like, I was looking more into this, and I do think it's really neat how different parts of the moon are called seas or oceans. You know, you've got like the Sea of Tranquility where Apollo 11 touches down. Something I found fun is that Soviet landers overwhelmingly targeted the Sea of Crisis, the Mare Crisium, and then they all failed. I was kind of like, why would they pick that? Are they stupid? Why would they pick the Sea of Bad Things Happening? Just slowly filling up the bowl of the crater with dead Luna probes.
Just slowly leveling out the terrain.
That's why they had to be so big, is they were hoping if they could get enough of them down there, they could get a demolition derby going.
It's materials for the future Soviet space colony. Don't worry.
Exactly. Yeah, we will build it entirely out of these little medallions.
This is barely related, but God, I really want to see a SnowRunner level based on this now.
Yeah. Driving the Lunokhod around.
Yeah. This should be like the bonus level.
They did have problems like that driving around on the moon because they get caught in craters a whole bunch of times and have to spend days or weeks getting out. So they land successfully. The lander Luna 17 is on the moon. The rover team then had a 3-hour debate on how exactly to drive the Lunokhod down the ramp and to the surface, because the lander had come down at a slight 4-degree angle and they were really paranoid about tilting it. Because again, if this thing rolls out, because it's kind of high up and that ramp is just 2 long pieces of aluminum.
Oh,
It could fall off, and if you tip the Soviet Union's only moon rover, you're gonna go out to the warm rock hut. You're gonna get to join those dudes in Baikonur.
you're gonna be gently warmed to a permanent end.
What if this is how we get rad scorpions from Fallout?
No,
you know, like they're
stop.
doing the scorpion fight game, but at the center is the warm rock.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's the hot marshmallow is here to make your children big and strong.
And green. So eventually they finally figured out, like, what if we just drive it down the ramp? And then that worked. And Lunokhod 1 rolled off the lander and onto the lunar surface, becoming the first remote vehicle on the surface of another celestial body. And I know we've been laughing and making fun of that, but like, I do need to give props. That is a huge engineering and scientific win.
Agreed.
Even if this is happening after humans are already, have already been there. When news got to Alexander Kemerjian on the success of his rover, he was, as per Soviet space tradition, in the hospital for surgery. This keeps fucking happening. Korolev dies in ass surgery. Mission gets cooed while he's in surgery. Chalamet dies in the bed immediately next to Ustinov, who then dies immediately after him.
Are you telling me that it was stressful to work on the Soviet space program?
They love to die in surgery.
They're constantly back and forth between surgery.
But see, this is what modern medical science has given us, because like Jair Bolsonaro never could have survived in this era, but now he gets to be permanently in the hospital because we've progressed enough. We have the technology to keep him alive in surgery constantly.
Sergei Korolev, if he had survived, would just be like 80% tumor by this point.
At least, behind Bolsonaro, he just has the advantage of not really being human anymore. It's just mostly the fungi.
His blood is saline, his veins are tubes. He is more medical part than human.
He is being ridden by the parasite.
The idea that these old Soviet scientists and engineers spend so much time in the hospital, it's like I gotta pack things into my busy schedule, right? I got work. I have work I have to get done. There's a conference I need to go to. I have to spend some time at the hospital.
I gotta get defibrillated a couple of times.
Listen, you cannot blame Bolsonaro for what he does because it's not him. He's being ridden by the fungi.
Just like the rover.
Bolsonaro in a touching RoboCop-esque scene, discovering his own past.
He is Sergei Korolev.
Yes.
The fucking RoboCop 2 scene where all the robots are killing themselves, but it's just like, it's the Lunokhod, the lid opens and reveals Sergei Korolev's shriveled husk.
Jesus Christ.
Fuck.
I love how you've like pivoted to like Lenin-esque deification of Korolev.
Yeah. Well, like I on the one hand, I have repeatedly said how much I hate the great manification of space, where like the entire space race is viewed as Sergei Korolev versus Werner von Braun, and where nowadays it's like, oh, Elon Musk built the entire rocket himself overnight. But at the same time, I do think that like any OKB head is a deeply hilarious figure because I like the Star City series that came out. I like For All Mankind. I like how they've done that. They could have done Korolev better. They should have made him fatter. They should have made him like constantly eating. They should have made him screaming and having minor heart attacks daily.
Just micro strokes by and by.
Basically, like what I am asking for is like, rest in peace knowledge fight. They could have cast Alex Jones for that. Alex Jones is a kind of Korolev figure, except Korolev was smart.
Yeah, this works with my ideology because I don't believe in great man of history theory, but I do believe in funny man of history theory. Oh, yeah. And that's ultimately much better entertainment.
And like any OKB head, well, I mean, a couple of OKB heads don't fit into that category, but they're not the ones that made history. It's fucking Glushko, Chalamet, and Korolev. So yeah, Kemerjian, the father of rovers, the man who like effectively invented the concept, is in surgery. I wasn't able to find out what for. I'm just picturing like like at mission control, the rover touches down, everybody jumps up out of their seat and starts cheering, and then fully half of them immediately just keel over.
Just their blood pressure was, 2 points away from lethal levels, and they just sent it over.
Yeah, like you stand up really quick and all of the blood leaves your head, except it's all of the blood just leaving your body.
You popped a leak.
With the rover on the moon, the tank crews could get to work driving it around, and they quickly discovered some problems that hadn't been caught during testing. The driving cameras were mounted and angled low on the rover, which gave the driver and navigator a very bad idea of what they were actually about to drive up on. They did not have a good view ahead of them.
So are you saying that I can approximate this by just, taping off most of my windshield?
It's kind of like try and navigate an unfamiliar building while walking around and staring at your feet.
Hell yeah.
This was an immediate problem because one of the first things Lunokhod 1 did was it drove into a crater and it got stuck. They could not reverse out.
Not like flipped over stuck, but just...
We're talking about, like, remember that this is the size of a small car and they drive into a crater that is maybe like 6 inches deep. And they're stuck. They spend several nerve-wracking hours Austin Powersing their rover around this tiny little crater until they are able to find a way out.
Are you telling me that they couldn't just, jettison a wheel?
Escaping a predator like a house centipede by blowing your legs off.
Spraying radioactive gas like a bombardier beetle.
I drop the hot marshmallow into the sand of the moon and leave.
So this also made the work of the radio operator a living hell. His entire job was to manually keep the rover's antenna pointed at Soviet transmitters in Crimea. I need to clarify here, not at Earth, specifically at Crimea.
Oh.
So he's got his tiny little screen and he's desperately trying to line up with a little bit of Ukraine. It's like come on. Meanwhile, the driver is like left, right, left, up.
The driver's ripping donuts because he just has stuck it into a 6-inch deep fucking hole is what almost flummoxed this thing.
Hey, Quinn, this reminds me very much of Barotrauma. This is when the captain is fucking, like, full hog sending the throttle, and you're the engineer in the reactor room trying to keep up with it.
I hate it.
You say that like it's a hypothetical, even though you know that we have played that exact scenario.
Yes, that's why I said it.
Yeah.
But it's also a hypothetical because it's like other people do that too. It's not just us.
Yeah. So now you'll be justified in the future. So there was also a lot of debate about what the fuck the rover should actually be doing because they had never figured that out.
Of course.
They designed the thing and sent it up there and then made a mission for it afterwards.
Yes. Well, okay, they had every team involved had a different idea of what the mission was going to be, and they all conflicted. like later NASA Mars rovers, the scientists wanted to stop and experiment on every single rock. They would constantly be like pointing out, they would be getting the data and they would be saying like, hey, can we detour to look at that? Hey, can we get like soil readings over there? The Kremlin, meanwhile, just wanted the rover to go as fast as possible so that they could brag about distance records.
They were trying to make the rock ethnography diagram is what they were trying to do.
This whole, like, holding out the warm rock, like, all right, ours is better.
Our rock is warmer. Check it.
Yeah, it's just a temperature probe. They're just checking the moon, like, cold, cold, cold. So yeah, like, the Kremlin just wants them, like, the Kremlin does not want them to stop. They are supposed to drive as far and as fast as possible so that we can talk about how far this thing drove. And the drivers, they don't want to do anything risky because, again, if they ding the rover, if they get it caught in another fucking puddle, they're dead. So you have these three kind of competing views of what should be going on, and that means that, like, they don't really focus on anything. And if you look at the path that Lunokhod 1 takes, you can kind of see it. I'll describe it, but if you look at that picture, it starts off at Luna 17, it drives south, and then they change their mind and drive back north again. They drive back to the landing site like, let's not go that way.
Are you fucking... Oh, yeah, no, you are not kidding me.
At one point, when the scientists wanted to explore a small crater off the beaten path, the drivers firmly told them, quote, it's a Lunokhod, not a Luna stop, which basically means it's a rover, not a stopper.
Awesome.
Yeah. They got stuck in another crater.
Fantastic.
This one took them nine whole hours to get out
so
of.
they Luna stopped it. Love to hear.
Yeah.
Hey, they had plenty of time to take samples while they were stuck there.
Yeah. This one's actually kind of funny because the way it is described, they start driving into this crater and then the edges of it are really dusty, so they fully slide. Like they do fucking like me trying to snowboard down the wall of this crater. And the way they get out, they can't just drive straight out, so they have to drive like a helical pattern around the walls of the crater, slowly getting higher and higher until they're finally able to escape. And this takes like 9 hours and they slip down a whole bunch of times. It sounded like a struggle.
They Skyrim horsed their way out of the crater.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just out of curiosity, like, obviously they have the solar panels. Maybe I missed it, but like, what is the like actual... I assume there's some sort of transitional battery phase between solar panel and then electric motors.
Yeah.
And like, I'm assuming it's shipped with a charge and it could theoretically recharge. But like, how far of a range is it supposed to have? Like when night comes? Because obviously, like, the main thing that they're concerned about is like heat rather than cooling, which is also interesting to me.
Yeah. So whenever night comes, this thing never drives without its solar panel up.
Okay.
Whenever night comes, they hibernate. They shut down.
Oh, okay.
So they spend 2 weeks driving, and then they spend 2 weeks hibernating, and then they get back in contact with it.
Okay.
During the day, it trundles along slowly through the regolith with its solar panel deployed and the ventilation system wicking hot air out through its radiator.
Okay.
And then at night, they rely on the hot rock to keep everything warm.
Okay. So basically the range is however far we can make it in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I can track it down. I will track it down for part 2, but I don't have info in front of me on what its battery systems were. I do know that it did have them because, you know, the lid wasn't always exposed to the sun. I know a couple of times they had to like point the lid specifically at the sun to get a bit more charge.
Yeah, I'm just genuinely curious because like the NASA's answer for the Apollo rover was like, it doesn't recharge. This is it's basically like we have thrown some energizers in the thing and we cannot recharge it.
Best get home before it runs out.
Yeah. So the idea of having to actually have like a chargeable battery is kind of wild to me.
Yeah.
There's also the mental image of the Subaru auto opening issue where it would just open up all the way and then just whack shut. I'm just seeing that happening as well.
Are like if the lid on the Lunokhod like slammed shut like a clam?
Yeah, it hits full extension and then just pop down.
So they continued this pattern for 11 months, 321 days, on a rover that was only designed to last 3 months. What finally did the little Lunokhod in wasn't getting trapped in a crater or some failure of the electronics. It was the hot rock. Polonium-210 has a half-life of 138 days.
Oh.
doing some napkin math, after 321 days, 80% of that rock would turn into lead. And again, I know that was based on pure polonium calculations. I don't know the exact composition of the gadolinium polonium alloy that they
either way,
use.
you're still losing your polonium.
Exactly.
Component,
Either way, by the time this rover died, the hot rock was mostly lead. So, with the rock being insufficiently warm, the rover froze during its 11th lunar night and was officially declared dead on October 4th, 1971.
R.I.P.
Rip our little lad.
R.I.P. the goober.
And that, listener, sorry, I should mention, I can't believe I forgot to put that in here. It drove more than 10 kilometers in total, setting a record, although now that record has been significantly surpassed. But still...
It's still pretty good, though.
Oh, yeah, for a first try, most first try rovers make it a couple of feet and then die. I'm thinking of what's the U2? U2-1 rover, I believe, was the first Chinese moon rover. Okay, no, it actually did travel a fair bit, but Sojourner couldn't travel that far and died immediately.
Yeah, I mean, also, there is the landing problem, which is actually pretty difficult to overcome. So, being able to land it and then still drive it off the ramp successfully is its own accomplishment. It is actually it's funny because it's just drive down the ramp, but also at the same time, that is kind of wild.
and you're doing all of this from several thousand kilometers away with a very flaky, with 2-second delay at the best of time, and you're watching a shitty TV screen. And you have the commander and the radio operator all screaming at you.
Yeah, and the radio operator, of course, has to keep re-aiming the antenna. That's pretty good, I would say. This is, again, this is a perfect Soviet space project in that it is actually, on its merits, it's pretty cool. It's too bad about all the other shit that led up to it, rushing it or, changing deadlines suddenly for political reasons or not doing science because we wanted to get an easy win for a record.
That actually lines up well because one of our favorite things on this show is an old Soviet quote, the quote that led to Laika being launched into space, which is, wouldn't it be nice to have something for the holidays? A very implicit, hey, you're going to get this done because I have a rally where I want to talk about it.
The 4th of July is only a month away. Ooh. It would be really nice to have something for the holidays.
Artemis 2.5. And that, listener, is where we are going to end this episode and part 1 of our series on the Soviet lunar rovers. In part 2, we will talk about Lunokhod 2, the death of the rover program, how the designers actually became heroes in Chernobyl, and why one of the rovers on the moon is owned by the guy who made the Ultima games.
Wait, the Chernobyl robot.
Yeah, that's them.
Hell yeah.
It's not a spoiler because this is the part where I was reading and I was crying because of how cool these guys are. In the show Chernobyl, in the miniseries, it's presented as though the rover just doesn't work and they throw it out and they go with the dudes with shovels. That only happened on one roof. The rover was still used on 2 other roofs and it saved lives by those kids with shovels not having to go out and do it.
Are you telling me that the Western retelling of Chernobyl has factual inaccuracies about the events?
That it's been kind of skewed? Nah.
And it doesn't mention it in the show, but the guys who are driving the rover, they did not have time to train liquidators. They whipped up a robot bulldozer that was radiation hardened in a couple of weeks, and they brought it to Chernobyl, and because they could not train people in time, they volunteered. And because of the radiation environment, because they couldn't transmit from far, they had to be on the other side of the wall from where this rover was operating. A bunch of them got, not deadly, but a bunch of them wind up getting cancer. A bunch of them wind up with bad radiation doses.
Oh.
Alexander Kamurgian spends months in hospital in Moscow, again, but this time for radiation poisoning, because this team volunteers. Not exactly the happy ending, but still, I want to talk about that. I want to spoil it here or whatever, just because, these dudes are fucking heroes.
Are you telling me that the collapse of the Soviet Union is sometimes depressing?
Yeah, and that good people doing their best suffered for institutional stupidity, and that's not even just a Soviet thing.
It still hurts.
That tends to be the problem with the space disaster, with making a space disaster show, is that very rarely do the disasters kill the people responsible. Nadellan catastrophe aside.
Yeah, the first split second, Mitzrafan Nadellan was just sitting in his chair doing his best impersonation of the RCA guy getting blown back in his chair before he was smeared out of reality.
as fucking devil's venom is pouring in through the window.
Yeah, he chose to withstand it for a bit.
Yeah, all of his medals protected him for a split second more than everyone else.
Was it the RCA man?
The guy getting blasted back by the speakers. Yeah, I'm not certain of the brand, but
you know who I'm talking about.
I know what you mean. Yeah. But, we will also talk about why Lord British, the guy who made the Ultima games, and who is also the son of an astronaut, owns one of these rovers. But that will be for the next episode. Victoria, thank you so much for coming on this show. Thank you for talking about this, the Buran, and for learning about the Lunokhod with us.
Yeah, this has been absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Is there any place people can find your stuff?
Yeah, I have a podcast about, we call it Automotive Culture, the Collapse of Empire, and Motorsports, called Trangralismo. That's with my co-host, Jordan Hofstetter. We do an episode once a week. I'm on Blue Sky at Victoria Scott, bsky.social, and I am occasionally, usually lately, co-host on Well, There's Your Problem, an engineering, a podcast about engineering disasters with slides.
Awesome.
I just had a really stupid thought.
Stomp it before it gets away.
That the first Frenchman in space was also Jean Chrétien.
No. It's infinitely less relevant. I was just imagining, Victoria, like, you're the lady of the lake, except you hand out the Buran. You hand out the Energia Buran to the worthy.
Yeah, no, I whenever I someday manage to rescue it from its storage unit in Houston, you're all welcome to come
save it
pet
from
it.
Texan hell.
Yeah, you can come pet it. You can come take photos with it. I would love to rig up some kind of complicated lighting system for it, so it looks like it's on a launch pad. These are all goals for someday in my life. But this podcast is Buran worthy.
I can't remember if I promised this to multiple people already, but we would love to have you back whenever we do the Buran series. You mentioned it at the start of like being brought down by the state collapsing. I mean, there was also the hangar collapsing and taking a bunch of its engineers with it.
Yeah.
But listener, definitely go check out all of those shows, and you will find them all linked down below. As for us, we will be back with part 2 of this series. So, listener, until next time, thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Thank you to everyone who have signed up to support the show, and a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are Alex K, Asha Rin, Boss, Kataiga Reptile, Charlie, Comrade Sleepy Bro, Daniel F, Graham E, Jesslyn T, Jorg 2, Building My Rockets in Achtetatis Ravahase Hereds Habhurdias, Joss, Kamo, Lane of the Wired, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Murray Motorsports, Mysterious Stranger, Oil Drum, Pat, Halsey, Rare Scrungles Fingus 3rd Edition, Skylab Bricks, Source Force, Spectre Cohen, The Mass of Grey Goo, formerly known as Wingsmith, Tortilla Baron, Vivek D, and What's the Character Limit for a Patreon Name Anyway? Our space dogs are a Union Thug, A. Blinkham, Agent Carter, Alex S., Alexander the OK, Alice N., Alan N., An American Robin, Angie, Angry Old Man Yada Yada, Anthony C., Argent Blue, Arlen S., Atomic Hobbit, Autofox, Avocado Assassin, Baron M., Batday, Ben L., By Barbarian, Big Meg, Binary Badger, Labilius Blix, Beanie, Bod Vogue, Boomzilla, Boring Brian, Booge, C. Cantaloupe Was Taken, Celeb Gill, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles H., Charlotte M., Chris K., Christian K., Clay M., Cole C., Captain Lag, Cynical Scribble, Daddy Bongo, Darth Baby, David L., DeSmiley, Dom K., Drain Bandage, Dr. Shockmaster, Duke of New York, Hank, Aaron, Eric J., FBH, Flatbread Shrimp, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, Garrett B., George B., Grant K., Griffin, former snow shoveler of Burger King. Heiko S. Howl's Moving Pictures by Rush. Human Post-Fuel Soup. I heard Stephen Miller is a pedophile. Isn't that crazy? I hope you have a good day. Ian R. Iggy Noranis. JMM. James A. James C. James T. Jamie K. Jarl Breadmaker. Jerry M. Jedediah D. Joan of Bark. John C. John E. John Boy D. Johnny Terrors. Jonathan G. Jonathan W. Just Morse. Kate B. Kate D. Corbin the Dog. Cruzzy. Lens Wipe. Liliana. Lorgath. Luke O. Alexins PC. Majestic Affect. Man Who Is Average. Mar. Marigold Muskrat. Marto. Maxwell B. Mech Girl Alley. Michael. Michelin Star Blemtro. Mish. Mr. Dr. John. Mitch P. Newman Instrumentality Project. Nellie W. New Name. Nicholas S. Nick S. Nolan B. Norman W. Northeast Driver. NSFW NSA. Outlook Cov. Panda. Pat S. PB. Poop Butt. Randall. Ray H. RBK. Rato B. Riley. Robert G. Sailor of Fortune. Scott K. Sean F. Sean H. Sensual Kazoo. Sean P. Shetty Hanks. Silly Vixen. Skyhawk. Something. Spirit of Thunder. Starborn in the Sky. Starlight Foxalope. Strone Ahone wants to say thanks to Chris. Swanee. The Best Sean. Thomas M. Tim P. Toasty Ken. Trashed. Verash T. Brisk. William O. William P. Winston P. Wouter S. Zachary JB. Zap. Zemo. Zim. And Zombie Dwarf. Albert Count. 231. Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.